Hello guys, this video is for Algebra 2, Week 5, Day 1, on the topic of transformations of radical functions. Okay, so those of you who have already picked up the packet, you would notice that your homework for Day 1, which is Monday, is page 2 for all. And if you are in honors, you also have to do page 3. Okay, so I'm going to review the formula for like transformation type of radical functions. So sometimes you would have a plus or minus in the front, and then we have an a, big square root, a plus or minus again, and then a b, parentheses, oops, this is too long. Okay, x minus c, close parentheses, and then plus d on the outside. Okay, again, this should look really familiar to you because we have already talked about this in semester 1 and last section I also have talked about this. Okay, so I'm gonna real quick review what each of these items represent. So for the plus or minus in the front, okay, especially the minus part, the plus sign doesn't really matter, it's the minus sign. Anytime you see a negative in front of a square root, that means you want to reflect your original graph over the x-axis. Okay? So that means if I'm talking about this negative sign inside the square root or any radicals, that means you want to reflect over the y-axis. Okay? And then we got our a right here. The number that you're multiplying to the square root, it's the coefficient, right? So there's two kind of situation. It gotta be if this a is between 0 and 1. So that means, for example, it can be like, it's like 1/2, 2/3, or like 1/4, any of that that's smaller than 1 but is still bigger than 0. We would call that, hold up, examples. We would say this is compressed vertically by a factor of a. Okay, that means you want to kind of make the graph look flatter. Okay, and then if a is greater than 1, so example, it can be like, I don't know, like 2, 5, 7/2, any of that are examples of a greater than 1. In this case, you would call this stretch vertically by a factor of a. Okay, I'm going to highlight this and highlight this one. So two kind of situation. Okay, let's talk about b. So again, if it's inside the square root or inside the radical, most of the time you have to do the reciprocal of it. Okay, or you have to do the opposite. Like if you remember, let's talk about c first, because I think this one, most of you should remember this. If it's inside the parentheses of x minus the number or x plus the number, that we're talking about translation, right? Translate left and right. And if I say x minus 5, remember that means you want to move 5 units to the, 5 units to the right. Okay, if I'm talking about x plus 5, we're moving 5 units to the left. It's the opposite of what you see. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this B part. It's going to be really similar if I have the B is in between of 0 and 1. Okay, that is, actually the opposite. So it's going to be stretch. Instead of vertically, it's going to be horizontally by a factor of reciprocal of that, so it'll be 1 over b. Okay? And then if b is greater than 1, this would be compressed horizontally by a factor of also 1 over b. Okay? I will give some examples later, so don't worry if you don't quite understand what we're doing right now. But you just got to know that every one of these letters means something to transform your original function. Okay, last one, we're going to talk about plus d. That part, it's translate up and down. And if it's plus 5, we know it's move 5 units up. If it's minus 5, then it's move 5 units down. Okay. All right, so we're going to base on this, tutorial or labels up here and do some of the examples that we have so you know how to do it for your homework. Let's do this one. Example. So they would always give you the original. Let's say if my original is f of x equals to square root of x. And they said g of x equals to negative 1/2 square root of x. You got to tell me, how did it change from f of x to g of x? So you notice that the only thing that's different is this part, 1/2, and the negative. Okay, there are two separate type of transformation. So let's write down those two things. So what does the negative do? If you go back to the top and it's outside of the square roots, it reflects over the x-axis. Okay, and then the 1/2 multiplying to the square root is compressed vertically by a factor of exactly what it says. Okay, compressed vertically by a factor of 1/2. Okay, and you're done with that question. So let me show another one. Let's say if I have f of x equals to square root of x plus 2. Okay, let's say if this is your original and you got your g of x equals to square root of negative 4x minus 3. Okay, this looks pretty different. So how many type of transformation do you see here? Okay, the last number, it went from 2 to negative 3. So definitely that's a transformation right there. Okay, it originally was up 2, but then now we're going down all the way to negative 3. So from 2 to negative 3, Okay, it have actually went down 5 units. Okay, because 2 to -3, if you look at the number line, it went down 5 units. Okay, so that's one thing. Translate down 5 units. Okay, what's another thing that you see here? This number inside, which is a 4. Okay, so if it's a 4, it's a number that's bigger than 1. So we would do a compress horizontally by a factor of reciprocal of 4, which is 1/4. Okay? All right, last one. Negative. Negative, if it's inside the square roots, that means it's going to be reflect over the y-axis. All right. I will do some of your questions for you. Let me see. I think I can do, yeah, I can do 2 questions for you. Let's do number 7 and number 8. Okay, number 7 is f of x equals to cube root of x plus 5. And then g of x equals to cube root of negative x plus 5. And number 8 is f of x equals to cube root of 2x, and g of x is cube root of 8x. Okay, so for number 7, it looks almost the same, almost exactly the same, except for this negative right here. So that one should be pretty straightforward. You only have one transformation, which is reflect over the y-axis. Okay, number 8, it looks almost the same, but we went from a 2 to 8. So how do we go from 2 to 8? What do we multiply inside? Okay, so actually, this one. Originally, it was 2x, right? We actually multiply a 4. So instead of 8 being the number, it's actually 4 being the number that we were going to write the transformation for. Okay, so it's going to be compressed because it's a number bigger than 1. So it's going to be compressed horizontally by a factor of reciprocal, which is 1/4. Okay. I'm going to do 2 examples for the honors page. Honors page 3. This page, you guys have to write an equation for each function by transforming the equation as described. So it's kind of the other way around. Actually, I'm going to do it in the page. So this is your packet. I'm going to do number 2 and 3. So look at number 2. If you have originally square root of 2x, okay, and they want you to reflect over the y-axis, go back to your notes. We reflect over the y-axis, which means we want to put a negative inside the square root. Okay, and then we just drop down everything else. 2x. Okay, and you can label this as g of x. And that's it. That's your answer. Okay, let's do another one. Number 3. So originally it has a negative square root of x plus 4. And now they want to translate left 3 units and down 2 units. Okay, I say, I think down 2 units is easier, so I'm going to put -2 in the back. Okay, And then, so this was original, right? Let me change this color to something new. Okay, so minus 2. If I want to translate left 3 units, we are adding, because we're doing the opposite, 3 to it. Okay, so your final answer here would be negative square root of x plus 7 minus 2. That's your answer. Okay, so I'm going to continue for day 2. So this video is for 2 days. Day 2, your homework for this page is page 4, and you are rewriting radical expressions using rational exponents. Okay, so that means how do we go from square roots or cube roots, fourth root, those kind of stuff to exponents? Okay, so first off, if I have, like let's say in letter form, if I have a square root of x, okay, that's the same thing as saying x to the 1/2 power, because when we say square roots, we're finding a pair of the same thing. Okay, so that means it's 2. So square root of x equals to x to the 1/2 power. There's like an invisible little 2 out here, but we usually don't write it. Okay, but starting from cube root, we would write that little 3 on the outside. Okay, so you would know that this, if I write it in rational exponents, it would be x to the 1/3. Okay, the little number turned into a fraction. So if I do 4th root of x to the 2nd power, okay, you rewrite what's inside, which is x squared, and then we put the 1/4 on the outside. Okay, so you want to do 2 times 1/4. That will give you x to the 1/2. Okay, let me show a little bit more examples so you get the hang of how do you convert. Okay, 4th root of x to the 3rd power, it would be x to the 3 to the 1/4, which is x to the 3/4. Okay, let me have you guys do these ones. Okay, if you want to pause the video and do these 3 questions, go ahead and do so. Okay, so x to the 2nd power, and then remember the 5th root goes to over 5, so it would look like this. Okay, next one. There's an invisible one right here, so it will be x to the 1/5. Okay, this next one is a little bit different, because yes, we can rewrite all this in here and write the 1/3 on the outside, but we can do something to the 8. Okay, if you're gonna break down the 8, it's actually 2 and 4, and then 2 and 2, so we have 3 of the 2's, right? So we can rewrite the 8 as 2 to the 3rd power, x to the 6 to the 1/3. Okay, and that's when you're gonna take your 1/3, bring it into each of them. So it will be 2 to the 3/3, x to the 6/3, which is 2, because 3 and 3 cancel out. And then x to the 6 divided by 3 is 2. So this is your final answer. Okay, so I'm going to show you some of your homework questions. Let's do number 6 and number 8. So number 6, we have a to the 5th power b. And we know this is an invisible two roots, okay, square roots. So I'm gonna rewrite this as a to the fifth power, b to the, there's invisible 1 as well, so it's 1 to the 1/2, okay? And then we're going to take the 1/2, bring it into each of them. So we get a to the 5/2 and b to the 1/2. And that's your answer. If there's nothing that you need to simplify, just leave it as it is. Okay, let's look at number 8. Number 8 is a fifth root of 32 f of f to the fourth. Okay, again, let's rewrite it. We have 32 f to the fourth to the 1/5. We can do something to the 32. 32, if you break it down, is 2 to the 16, 2 and 16, 8 and 2, 2 and 4, and 2 and 2. So we have a total of 5 2's. So it'll be 2 to the fifth power, f to the fourth, and raise it to the 1/5. So your final answer would be 2 and f 4/5, because the 5 times 1/5 goes away. Okay, and that's your answer. Okay, so that's it for day 1 and day 2. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a picture and text to my work number. Okay.